Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip. Well, today is a very exciting day. Exciting for not just me or for my guest here, but also for the entire world because they all are closely watching what is unfolding in the US. That is, yes, of course, I'm talking about the US elections. And to discuss what this means, the way forward, I have with me two of our finest, the print columnists who write on foreign affairs. I have, of course, with me Mr. Rajesh Rajagopalan. He's the professor of international politics at JNU. He joins us online. And with me on my left is Monish Tourangbam. He's the director at the Kalinga Institute of Indo Pacific Studies. So, welcome to the print, both of you. My first question to you, sir, Rajesh, sir, what do you
Yeah,
are you willing to call the U.S. elections?
yeah, I think it is done now. It's basically it remains to be seen as to how many of the remaining um, states, the swing states that Trump will get. But as of now, I think it is there is not very much chance that Kamala Harris can recoup. So I think it is basically time to call it.
So it's a Trump presidency for you. What about you, Monish?
I concur with Professor Rajesh Rajagopalan. I think it's a done deal right now. It just remains to be seen the margins. Remains to be seen whether he wins both the popular votes and the electoral college votes. And also, it's significant that the Associated Press has already called the Senate
Yeah.
as under the control of Republicans, and that is going to matter a lot in terms of a Trump 2.0 foreign policy and its engagement with the outside world.
Well, because the Senate controls all the appointments. So when it comes to appointment of new judges, judiciary, CI director, even an ambassador to India, which was in a limbo for a very long time in the previous administration, and then of course House. So one will have to really wait and see for the House. But Professor, in your sense, what does it mean for the Trump 2.0? How do you foresee the Trump 2.0?
Yeah, this is one of those somewhat difficult election campaigns where there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about specific plans on either side. I mean, I don't think there was very much understanding of what both candidates planned to do once they became the president. So both it was primarily focused on personality, both on Harris's personality as well as on Trump's personality, as well as the Biden administration's performance, since Harris was a part of that. So there wasn't a huge amount of discussion about what the future holds. Obviously, we know some aspects of it. I mean, Trump has talked about a tax cut for the very wealthy, so that part is something that I will expect that he would do this time too, as he did the last time. We can expect some changes, maybe on the border, but border he was there for 4 years. He couldn't really do very much because it's a very difficult problem. So it's one thing to campaign on that, but it's another thing to actually do anything concrete on those kinds of issues. So when it comes to domestic issues, I think the beyond that tax cut, I am not really clear as to what his agenda would be for the coming next 4 years. So I think that is something that will develop over a period of time.
So that is, you feel that is something that will develop over a period of time. But in your sense, Munish, how do you think his first 100 days would look like? Because he comes riding on big promises and call for change, right?
Yeah. I think it is interesting to see watch out because he has 4 years of presidency behind him, which was seen to be disruptive by many allies and partners, especially in Europe, not so much in Asia. 4 years of presidency dealing with China, largely on focus on the trade wars, but also he has made some outlandish comments that not only with NATO partners, but even with Taiwan, he is going to be more transactional. And I think he used the comment saying that America is nothing more than an insurance company
Yeah.
for Taiwan. So I think we have to dig deeper into the 4 years of his presidency. And we have to also remember that 4 years of Biden administration has also flown down in the river, and many geopolitical changes have happened. Whether it is the Ukraine war, which was not there when he was last time, and his whole comments about outlandish promises of ending it within 24 hours.
Exactly.
So a lot has happened externally, a lot has happened internally in the last 4 years when he was out of power. So whether he would come back and then pull it from the day he left the presidency, or to what extent he is going to consider the changes that have happened in the Biden administration and either take it on an opposite direction entirely, or whether the forces of domestic politics or external politics are going to be strong enough to also make him realize the sense of compromise and concessions that he has to make in order to run America for the next 4 years. I think it's also interesting to see that the team is not going to be the same. It's a different uh,
Absolutely.
Trump, and the House of Representatives and the Senate is going to be filled with different personalities. And also, Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2050. But now, when he takes up power, we have to wait and watch how many of those Project 2050 guys will actually come into his administration, and how it is going to align with real policies when he sits in the Oval Office.
Well, that's very interesting. One will really have to see where Trump takes off, whether he takes off from what he left in 2020 or whether it takes off from as of today. Professor, in your sense, like he mentioned about the fact that Trump in his campaign said that he would have not allowed the Russia-Ukraine conflict and he would end the war. In your sense, what do you think would be the immediate impact on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and also, what is happening in the Middle East when it comes to Israel? And I'm not saying it's a Israel Hamas war or it's a Israel Hezbollah war. It's actually an Israel Iran conflict. So, in your sense, what would those two see?
Yeah, in Ukraine, I mean, we'll have to wait and see, obviously, but Ukraine is in a bad shape, obviously, because Trump has a certain fascination with Putin and with Russia. So he's been very antipathetic to Ukraine even before to Zelensky. So we'll have to wait and see how that works out. But I would expect that he would deliver some kind of an ultimatum about settling the conflict, which would be favorable to Putin. And so Ukraine then has a choice. Ukraine doesn't have to listen to, obviously, to the United States, but the U.S. provides the bulk of its military support.
What
And I do not see Trump hesitating in pulling support from Ukraine. Obviously, the Europeans would then have to step in, which again I'm very doubtful that Europeans would do that. So it's not particularly pleasant to a pleasant situation as far as Ukraine is concerned. As far as the Middle East goes, there was obviously the Abrahamic Accords, and that
Yeah.
was something that was potentially had some benefit, and it might have led to the Hamas attack last year because the Palestinians were being left out of that. Uh, but obviously, you're right. I mean, it is ultimately a Iran-Israel fight, and whether Trump would be willing to get involved in that, because he had some bad words to say about Netanyahu, also about how Netanyahu did not support um, the hit on Soleimani when Trump was president. So it remains to be seen whether Trump would support, for example, an Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities or on Iranian petroleum facilities, which has been talked about. So yes, I think Netanyahu thinks that he has a friend and a supporter in Trump, but Trump doesn't really have any very fixed views on these things, and so it's somewhat uncertain about how he will handle that.
But correct me, Professor. But Trump has spoken out against the U.S. or the Biden deal with the Iranians, right? He's talking about bringing back sanctions. So that is something that you can expect.
Yeah, but that definitely he has said that, and he did. institute sanctions against Iran. But beyond that, I'm talking about specifically joining with
Yeah.
Israel in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities or petroleum facilities, which is what they have been planning to do, which they wanted to do. But of course, Israel also wants the US to take the lead on that, and so that's where the issue lies.
Yeah.
It's quite chaotic because the situation is not the same as it was when he left.
Exactly.
It's a lot more complicated with several other groups involved and so on. So that we have to wait and see how that pans out.
Munish, if you go by what the professor is telling us, people who seems to be happy is Putin is very happy, Zelensky is sad, and then you also have the Israeli prime minister who is extremely happy. In your sense, what do you think will happen to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and Iran?
Well, I will not buy too much into the happiness quotient that you are talking about of of the Russian leader or Netanyahu himself. As Professor Rajagopalan pointed out, I think Trump comes with the Putin baggage. There
Yeah,
is a lot of I think perceptions or misperceptions about his ties with Putin, as well as also he comes with the Zelensky baggage. You
true.
have a history of uh, he trying to sort of instigate or Zelensky when he just come into power to investigate into the Biden family businesses in Ukraine. So he comes with this baggages, right? Um, a lot has happened in the last 4 years that he wasn't there. The Russia Ukraine war is almost going to be 3 years old,
Exactly.
right? And we have seen a very deeply divided US Congress on the issue of aid and assistance
Yeah,
towards the Ukraine war. And I think with control of the Senate, and let's watch out for the congressional results, um, and with him in the Oval Office, that is going to go for a major toss up in terms of how the Americans are really going to go ahead in terms of either keeping on supporting the Ukraine war, the Ukrainian effort, or pulling in the plug from that. I think regarding the wider West Asia conflict, I think we also have to put in point that the Taliban deal that the Trump administration did fructified, or let's say resulted in the Biden administration chaotic withdrawal from
yeah,
Afghanistan.
yeah.
Uh, that has featured quite a lot in terms of American boots on the ground in other
Exactly.
foreign wars. And I think that is going to also play a big role. The reminiscence of that is going to play a big role in how the Trump administration, which he usually portrays himself as someone who is there to stop wars and prevent wars and would not take America into another war.
Yeah.
So, to what extent, he's really going to go ahead because, and I concur with what Professor said, that he's an ideologically unhinged personality.
Exactly.
Unlike Biden or other traditional political leaders,
Even
yeah,
Republicans for that
he
matter.
doesn't come into any of those ideological commitments, and that's why it's very hard to predict what Netanyahu can actually expect from a Trump presidency. And I think to end it, I think also the Iran case, right? The Obama administration was the one which negotiated that deal.
Yeah,
He walked out of that deal, uh, but when the Biden administration came in, the Biden administration could not really undo it because a
exactly.
lot of things have changed again in West Asia, right? So there is a larger baggage of like the US Iran policy, and that the Iran US relationship has further gone downhill even during the Biden administration. So with that history and with the history of Trump, I think the US Iran Israel triangle is going to get more complicated in terms of more volatile in terms of how it is going to affect the security of wider West Asia.
Interesting points that you both have mentioned. Now, I'd like to come back home. You know, what would a Trump administration mean for India, Professor Sir?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at is potentially a more chaotic international order. I mean, it was already there. It was already getting there. Um, there are some structural conditions that cannot be changed. One of which is that the U.S. has been relatively weakening somewhat vis-a-vis China and vis-a-vis the global system. So it's not, I mean, it's not as bad as the US decline as such. I mean, I don't think the US is declining, but nevertheless, there is a certain amount of weakening that the US has faced, a relative decline that the US has faced. So it's not, so it that does mean that US allies and partners will have to worry about whether the United States has a capacity to protect them as it has for the last 50, 60 years since the end of the Cold War, or since the end of the Second World War, with the U.S. alliance structure in the Indo-Pacific as well as in Europe. Now, in addition to worrying about American capacity, obviously America's partners will have to worry about American willingness, especially with somebody like with Trump, because he's not even a traditional Republican. So he's, as Munish said, I mean, he's not even, he doesn't have those ideological sort of um, leanings which would suggest some kind of a commitment to international order or to American partners and allies. So he did want to leave NATO even in the first term, but he had people within his administration who would not let him do what he wanted. This time, we don't know what the situation would be. There have been a lot of much more serious concern in Central Europe because Western Europe, the larger, richer countries in Western Europe, haven't really stepped up to bear their share of the burden of maintaining stability in Europe. And if the US is not there anymore, then that whether the Central European countries will need to create some sort of a new partnership amongst themselves to hold back Russia. Similarly, um, in East Asia, in the Indo-Pacific region, whether countries like South Korea or Japan or even Australia, which have started talking about building their own nuclear weapons. So it is it presages a sort of a much more uncertain international order, and Trump thrives on chaos, but unfortunately, in international politics, chaos can potentially be quite problematic, especially for
It can be
America's partners.
problematic. True. But Munish, while he's spoken about what the Europe and the international order, specifically coming to India, how do you think? What does it mean for India, the Trump presidency?
Well, I think there is an overriding, let's say, consensus within the Indian strategic community or those who comment on the India-US relations.
And even on the social media also,
Yes,
right?
that there is an overriding sense of confidence, a calm confidence on the bipartisan support inside the United States when it comes to India-US relations. So I don't think we were already prepared, right? The American close allies in Europe, they were the ones who were more anxious
Yeah,
about a Trump comeback, and I think seconding to what Professor said. Uh, we are entering a wall adrift at a time when America itself seems to be in adrift.
yeah,
So that I think that sense is very much there. But coming back to close home India, I think much of the structural communalities that brought this relationship this far, many of the institutional linkages that we have built over the years, whether it's the ICET or whether it's the defense 1 2 plus 2
yeah.
dialogue, or the multilateral quad. I think all of this has been supported by both the administrations,
Absolutely.
right? So I don't think there is going to be much anxiety in India as to how to respond to the Trump administration. Having said that, I think there might be something to watch out for in terms of how Trump would approach the Indo-Pacific economic framework,
Yeah,
the IPEF. We haven't signed on to the regional comprehensive economic partnership, which is China led. So
yeah.
we are into IPEF. We are in the other pillars. We are not in the threat pillar. So we have to watch out in the first days of his administration as to how he would approach multilateral trading, trade regimes, right? And also, one point that I would to leave with is that uh, you know US foreign policy is a global foreign policy. It's it's much broader than our own circle of
Absolutely.
interest, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes the US foreign policy has second order and third order effects, which are not necessarily targeted towards India, but we have to brace up for that, right?
Okay.
How US approaches Myanmar unrest, how US approaches the regime change
In
happening in
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh,
Yeah.
how US approaches the economic crisis in Sri Lanka and Maldives, how US approaches Pakistan, for instance, and how US deals with
China.
Taliban rule Afghanistan, China. This may not be directly done with an India focus in mind, but we have to deal with the second order impact of that. So
So
we
we
have to
have to brace up.
brace up for,
While many people would be happy that a Trump is
yeah,
in,
yeah,
but we'll have to
brace up, yeah.
brace up for the repercussions also. Professor, while we talk about India, Modi and Trump have had an excellent relationship. You had the Howdy Modi that was held. You also had like for example, Trump in his recent statement said that Modi is a very good friend, and he called him a fantastic man, fantastic leader. With Trump in the White House, how does it impact Modi? Does it make Modi more powerful, Prime Minister Modi more powerful? Or at least, if not more powerful, Prime Minister Modi more relaxed?
Yeah, I don't know that it has any significant domestic political uh, uh, effects in India as such. I mean, whether Modi is a friend of, Modi is of course a friend of all leaders. So that's at one level, these are not particularly serious statements because obviously that's not real friendship. It's a sort of it's just statements that people say for because they like saying that. So it's not really friendship in that sense. It's not like Trump is going to do anything for India specifically because of any 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 feelings, even if he has them towards Modi. But obviously, that has no domestic political context, domestic political effects in India because clearly Prime Minister Modi is fairly popular, and I don't think he really needs Trump. It doesn't really make very much effect. I don't think it does. But in terms of the larger effects on India, a couple of different things. One is obviously a far more unstable Indo-Pacific, and Asia is not really to India's benefit. A international order in which uh, the American structure of partnerships and alliances, if that fails or if that withers away, that is also not in India's interest. Things like AUKUS or things like the Quad, we don't want not just the ones that directly involve us, but also other ones that ensure American participation and American involvement in maintaining a balance in the Indo-Pacific and in the global system as a whole are things that we want. I mean, they are things that are beneficial to India also. If those things are if those things deteriorate, then that could potentially be damaging to Indian interests also. And the other part of it is also, of course, the trade part, which is the if uh, Trump goes on another sort of a set of tariff spree as he has promised to with regard to China. Obviously, China is not just China; it's links to a lot of Indo-Pacific countries, including India, and so we will have potential consequences.
Absolutely, because Trump also called India a trade abuser. That was the word that he
Yeah,
used.
yeah. I mean, but I'm saying even if it's not directly against India, uh, any kind of tariffs, even on China, will have an impact on it.
Will have an impact on India. Munish, now, one of the things while under the Biden administration, there's a lot more growth that is seen between India and the US, right? If you look at defense, if you look at technology transfers, if you look at regional understanding, of course, then there are issues like the Pannoon issue, and of course, their democracy and their freedom of religion and all comes into play, and that is something which the Indian administration or the Indian leaders here are very do not like, right? They see it as interfering in India's affairs. But with Trump it is very transactional. So do you think how does it what would it mean for Prime Minister Modi? Would he would he not stop worrying, have to worry about what the US will constantly say about multiple issues that it otherwise does?
See, coming to the issue of relationship between leadership relationship, and I absolutely agree with what Professor said in the beginning. The structural forces are more important, right? Because when Prime Minister Modi won, the elections for the first time, there was a lot of hesitation
Yeah,
regarding our relationship, and more particularly regarding his relationship with President Obama,
exactly.
right? But then it didn't take too long for President Obama to be invited as a chief guest to the Republic Day celebration, a
Yeah.
first time for a U.S. president, and to continue the relationship whereby it went on as expected in terms of taking the relationship forward, right? So I think the structural forces which has brought India and US together in the Indo-Pacific, it matters more. And I don't see any drastic changes regarding that. Really, I think we need to watch out for, let's say, the new threat dynamics regarding technology and trade. For instance, the EV markets is quite going to be heated up with
Yeah.
the between Chinese and the European market, and also the Chinese and the American market. So
With Musk being a close
yeah,
supporter.
so the EV market, for instance, the market for semiconductors and critical minerals, these are going to be issues of importance where we need to work with the Americans and see where we can work with them together, right? So what happens with the China plus one strategy, diversification of supply
Yeah.
chains, India as a probable destination for that, these are things that we need to work on. I think regarding some of the socio-political issues that keeps coming up from now and then, I think we have to understand that also that there are many agencies in the United States which work for different cause and purposes.
Yeah.
So it is not necessary that a Trump executive coming in is necessarily going to rein in some of those reports which are eyesore for us in India, right? So these are things that we have to take into stride and see how we can navigate. Even in the case of Pannun, I think the issue has been taken up among the concerned law enforcement agencies between the two countries. I think that is going to continue. So, regardless of the leadership change there, the nuts and bolts of the relationship is something that we have to navigate.
Well, the nuts and bolts of the relationship is that we have to navigate. But thank you so much, both of you. Professor Rajesh Rajagopalan, and of course Munish here, for joining here at the print and explaining to us and the viewers what we can expect from this Trump 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you.